Hi, this is Kentucky Governor Matt Bevin. I am sorry that I'm having to speak to you via video as opposed to in person. It had been my hope to be there with you directly. And there's nothing less compelling at times than to listen to somebody on a video. And I know some of you are tempted right now to be checking your phones. I would ask you, please bear with me just for a moment. I want to put a few ideas out there to talk about a few things that I'm hoping that after this video is over, you all have a chance to talk amongst yourselves about. My reason, interestingly, for not being with you is that some months ago, on an economic development front, specifically workforce development front, I made a request of our president and his team about allowing us to start a dialogue on a particular front. And interestingly, they convened people from around the nation and from around the federal government to meet with us specifically in response to the request, and it happens to be today at this same time. And so it's interesting how often the things that we're talking about that seem to be unrelated all come back to one thing. How do we make our state more competitive from a workforce standpoint, from an economic development standpoint, and of course those things driven very much from a tax standpoint. I appreciate you convening for this tax summit. I appreciate those of you who represent so many swaths of business, those from both the public sector, but then more particularly from the private sector, from companies large and small. I'm grateful to you for applying your knowledge, your expertise. There's a number of you who are attorneys that will be on some of these panels. There are people from my administration who will be on some of these panels, talking about things from a budgeting and an accounting and a legal standpoint as well. All of this is related to what are we doing on the tax front. Some of you will probably remember when I ran for office a couple years ago, I put forward what I called a blueprint for a better Kentucky. And that blueprint had 7 foundational principles. And those 7 foundational principles, I won't take you through each of them other than to say that if you recall, they were all economic in nature. They were all focused on fiscal things in general and things that otherwise would help to stimulate our economy and our economic growth. One of those, of course, was our tax structure. We have a very antiquated tax structure. We just do, and you know this. The Chamber has been aware of this for some time. I'm grateful for those of you who have for years sounded the alarm and tried to get people to focus on updating and modernizing our tax code. I've shared with some of you in this room and others as well that my vision for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and it has been said and I have noted time and again that without vision the people will perish. I didn't invent that, but it's very true. We've all heard it said. And so my vision for the Commonwealth, I think, is important for us to understand. And to the extent we can be of like mind with respect to pursuing it, the better the odds of us actually attaining it. If we don't have a vision, we're not going to be able to accomplish it. My vision is that we become the engineering and manufacturing hub of excellence in America, bar none. That nowhere else in America is it as obvious that if you want something engineered and manufactured to the highest degree of excellence, you really ought to start in Kentucky first. This is something that no state owns outright, which means it's available for ownership, and we're going to own it. That's my mission, that is my vision, and this is what our administration, in conjunction with our legislature, is focused on accomplishing. One of the most critical ways we're going to get this accomplished is via the tax code that exists or doesn't exist in this state. We've seen what happens even among global economies, where the United States corporate tax rate is frankly anti-competitive in many respects. That would be perhaps the nicest thing you could say about it. There's a lot that needs to change on the federal level, but I want to focus specifically on what we're doing here in Kentucky. And I want to encourage those of you that are gathered today, as you listen to these panels, as you engage with them, as you talk amongst yourselves, as you start to come up with ideas, to please think about what can we do here in Kentucky to accomplish this mission, to accomplish this vision, and to bring it to reality. How can we become the kind of environment that incentivizes those that engineer and manufacture 21st century products to do it here in Kentucky? One of the things we've got to do, taking into consideration the fact that we are the logistics hub of America increasingly, with UPS having their world port here in Kentucky and taking products literally all over the world every single night in a single flight. with DHL having their North American shipping hub in the northern part of our state and doing the very same thing, with Amazon building their prime air hub now in Kentucky and soon enough to be taking their products in conjunction with UPS and DHL, but even now independently on their own to varying degrees of taking their products from here in Kentucky to the world. We have riverways, we have roadways, we have railroads in addition to the airways that transect through this state that connect here in Kentucky in the middle of America in a way that make us a logistical hub that literally cannot be replicated. It would not be possible geographically to have the advantages that we have together with everything that's already here. So how do we leverage that? How do we take advantage of that? Well, given that, why, from a tax front, would we have an inventory tax? If we want to produce, manufacture, engineer, design, and send to the world 21st century products, why would we disincentivize those who might do this by having an antiquated approach to taxation, where we tax production and not consumption? I'll get to that in a moment. But certainly as it relates to inventory tax, one of the things I said in my Blueprint for a Better Kentucky is that we need to get rid of that, and I firmly believe it. And indeed, when we get to tax reform, and it's coming, mark my words, we will address and modernize our tax code as expeditiously as we can, in addition to the pensions and the budgets and everything else that we are wrestling with in the months ahead. But as we move forward on this front, getting rid of the inventory tax is something that has to be done. And yet it comes at a cost. When we already have constraints on our budgets, getting rid of something that is a significant part, especially of local and county level budgets, that can't just be done willy-nilly. Interestingly, of the about 150 some odd $1 million that are generated by the inventory tax, only about 10, 12, 13 of it maybe goes to the general coffers. The other 140 some odd million goes to local jurisdictions, local school boards, fire departments, libraries, whatever the case might be. These are dollars that they don't have the ability to easily replace. So we can't just say, hey, it would be good for Kentucky, let's get rid of it, and not be mindful of the impact that it has all the way down the line. So everything that I'm about to mention to you and the things you'll be discussing amongst yourselves, it's important for you to know that I've thought about, and I would ask you to think about, what is the ripple effect of each of these decisions, and make sure that we don't have unintended consequences with decisions that we ultimately make. So the inventory tax truly can be eliminated, and we can find ways to dedicate streams of revenue associated with whatever's necessary to replace those dollars for the communities that would be otherwise affected. We also need to get rid of the death tax. You know full well, in fact, some of you in this room may be among the folks, but certainly you know folks who, as they get near the end of their careers, as they retire, as they sell their businesses, they become citizens of another state. They may well go on to Florida or wherever that case might be. Why is that? Because it's just more tax advantaged. A big fear that I have, a concern that I have, is when people do this, they ultimately move there for at least 6 months in a day, sometimes on paper, but legally it's supposed to be for more than that, and some of them indeed do spend more than that, and then soon enough it's 9 months, and then 11 months, and maybe 12 months out of the year. And when people move with their assets to another state, eventually their children and grandchildren tend to migrate with them. Good odds of it. The net result is that when those monies change hands, that money does not get repatriated back to Kentucky. Certainly not as a typical matter of course. We should not be driving the wealth producers and the savers and the accumulators of the very seed capital that we need to move to another state. Bad idea. We've got to do better on this front. So getting rid of the death tax. We're one of half a dozen states or so that still have this. That's another thing that truly must be eliminated. There's a lot of other things that can be talked about as it relates to apportionment and whatever the case might be. But one of the things that is going to be critical as well is that we've got to align our state tax code with that of the federal government for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is just simplicity's sake. Kentucky has a very complicated, convoluted, non-user-friendly tax code. And truth be told, we're eliminating the ability to pull in more money than we actually do pull in through 400 and some odd different tax expenditures. And these tax expenditures, or loopholes as they're referred to by some, are there for a variety of reasons. And every one of them, with probably no exception, has at least some individual or group that is a strong proponent of them and will advocate for them to be left alone. And yet we exempt far north of $10 billion a year as a result of these. If we simply lined our tax expenditures as closely as possible to the federal tax code, we would immediately have a tremendous amount of additional income. Now, it's not as simple as just doing that, so we need to look at them piece by piece. But this is something that's going to happen. I would encourage those of you in this room, some of whom are the beneficiaries of an exemption, some of whom may not be, to talk about what is appropriate, to look at what other states around us are doing, to realize we're not in a vacuum. We don't get to make decisions in isolation and think that there's not a cost to that. There is an absolute opportunity cost associated with decisions that we make and decisions that we choose not to make, because states around us that are more competitive on the tax front use that as a tool against us. When I'm out talking to companies, when I'm out talking to those that we would have come here, and their names that you hear about over and over again, we've been able to bring the Amazons here, we've been able to bring the Brady Industries here, we've been able to get significant reinvestments from companies like UPS and like Ford and like Toyota, who are pouring billions of dollars back into our economy. Grateful to these folks, and we couldn't do it without them. And yet there are so many others out there that we would love to have come. For us to be competitive, to be able to compete, we've got to have a tax structure that allows me to go out and in good faith be able to tell people, you want to come here because. And so getting rid of some of these things we've talked about, structuring our tax code so that it's simplified, so that it doesn't penalize the very people we need for our future success, these are things we're going to have to do. These are things that I'm committed to doing. These are conversations that I look forward to having with you in the months ahead. What I would say is this: out of this summit, come up with ideas. Designate folks from among your ranks who are able and who are willing to be able to be the emissaries to John Chilton, who's my budget director, others in my office who will be able to take those ideas. People like Mark Bunning and others who are there today, who are going to take this, crunch this, and help us come up with ideas that will or will not be applicable going forward. Andrew McNeil, I believe, is there with you as well, and a number of you know him. These are people in my administration that are dedicated to taking the information and making sure that we act on it. I'm grateful to you for your willingness to be a partner to us. We need your input. We don't want to make these decisions in a vacuum. My ability to get out and compete is going to be something that differentiates us going forward or holds us back. By doing nothing, as states around us have become more competitive, as they have lowered their corporate tax rates and their individual income tax rates, as they have moved themselves to more consumption-based economies, that has, as we sat still, caused them to leapfrog us. And in essence, we're falling behind by staying stationary. That's unacceptable. That has to end. I saw something I want to show you on the screen here, and this kind of made me smile a bit. This was a chart that somebody put together, and it said that this is a graphic of the United States that includes a little red dot for every single metropolitan area that said it would be the ideal place for Amazon's second headquarters. Take a look at this slide. What you'll see as you look at that slide is the fact that everybody in America thinks they are the next best place for a company like that to locate a headquarters. And yet everyone can't be. Those that succeed are the ones who take topics like this seriously. You look at the abundance of what we have here, the quality of life, the geographic location, as we've talked about, the logistical capabilities, the workforce, the low cost of energy, the values, the ease of living, the availability of land, all these things that are to our advantage. The fact that even when there are major weather patterns battering our country, that we are blessed here in Kentucky not to take the brunt of any of those. We are very fortunate in this respect. This is not lost on people that are looking to locate. But I'll tell you, we've got to be serious about capitalizing on these things, our resources as well, including the fact that we have so much potable water. It's going to be a valuable commodity as we move into the future. How do we take advantage of this? We've got to come up with a tax structure that is simple and that ultimately rewards those that produce the wealth that our state needs. I do want to talk just briefly about moving from a production-based economy to a consumption-based economy. It cannot be done like that. There are many that would like to see this happen. I would be of like mind with many of you in some respects, but I also, in looking at this, realize there have to be gradations. Things have to move slowly over time. Not slowly to the point that no real progress is being made, but I would like to see income taxes, for example, start to not have a 6 in front, but a 5 and a 4 and a 3, and to move on down to the point where we don't have a state income tax. That, to me, would be the kind of incentive that allows us to attract companies whose employees, understandably, care about these things. I'll ask a question as well, and I would ask you to talk about this amongst yourselves. Why do we even have a corporate income tax at the state level? It's the same thing we talked about earlier, how uncompetitive this is for us globally at the federal level, same thing at the state level. I am convinced that if we allow companies, many of you in this room among them, to keep the monies that would have otherwise been paid as a corporate income tax, if we allowed you to keep that money yourself, you're going to do one of several things with it. You're going to deploy it. You're going to deploy it in the form of payroll, perhaps, or capital expenditures into property, or whatever the case might be, all of those things being taxable. The state will ultimately still have an opportunity to receive tax income from decisions that you make, but I'm more confident in your ability to take the leftover dollar and turn it into a dollar plus than if you send it to Frankfurt and just give us the ability to dispense of it. We don't put the seeds in the ground in ways that you would, and we don't create those perpetual abilities for us to have tax revenue. I'm confident in your ability, and I want to create an environment in which you're incentivized. I want this to be a state where people look to Kentucky as a place that gets it, that is nimble. This is part of how we've gotten these other companies this year, because we sit down at the table. We have a business-minded approach to things that is not the norm in elected office. It just isn't. And this is for many people throughout our administration. Many of us are former CEOs and people who have been CPAs and people who have been business lawyers and people who bring a mindset about getting business done. This is how things happen. I need your ideas. I need your input. I need your support. We're going to make Kentucky the envy of the world in many respects. We already are this remarkable gem. We truly are. We have something that truly is the envy of many as they look at it because of the things we've talked about. But how do we make sure that it's not just a dusty jewel lying on the side of the road, but that it has been picked up, buffed, and polished and held up, that it's a crown jewel mounted appropriately in attracting the light of those who look? And people are attracted to it and want to be associated with it. How do we make that happen? I've been asked in the past, and I may have even shared, I believe, with some of you in the chamber about what does success look like? If we truly follow this vision, if we modernize our tax code and make our state more business friendly and more friendly to the individual as well, and ultimately have more taxpayers but paying less each on average, a lower tax burden, but broadening that tax base, what does that look like? What does success actually look like? How do we know when we have accomplished what our vision truly is? And this is what I'd say to you, and I say it with no facetiousness. The reality is this: success will be when the governor of Texas and the governor of Indiana and the governor of Tennessee and of Florida and of Georgia and of fill in the blank, when the governors of these other states ask amongst themselves, why is it that all of our children need to go to Kentucky to get a job? That's when we will know that we have succeeded. Right now, too many of us, too many of our parents, too many of our universities, too many of our businesses are asking that very same question. Why do our kids have to go somewhere else to get the kind of jobs they want? Kentucky will become, over the generation ahead of us, the place that is a net attractor, where these other states literally will wonder why their states have to send their kids to Kentucky to get 21st century jobs. That is when we will know we've succeeded. So help me to help you, to help me to help you, to create this perpetual cycle of business and government working together in collaboration so that we can make Kentucky shine, so that we truly do excel, not only exceeding our own expectations, but surrounding ourselves with the kind of talent that makes us a place that, compared to the states around us and around the nation, is the place to go to. I'm confident we can do this. I'm grateful to you for your commitment to be at this meeting and to stay with us through the process, and for those among you that will step up as leaders to help make this possible. Thank you for this. Continue to challenge each other in the minutes ahead and the hours ahead as you continue to be gathered there. Thank you for your attention, and know that we are going to get this done because we are Kentucky.